Let's move to the next briefing item, which is the digital academic reading materials purchase. Dr. Swift.
Thank you, President Johnson and trustees, and we're joined by Assistant Superintendent Don Linden, and I'm delighted to have joining us Ann Reeder and Jennifer Colby, who've been on the front lines of putting a tremendous amount of work together so that we could bring this proposal forward. We're working to attach our work to our equity plan in more transparent ways. Pillar number 4 in our equity plan is equity-centered school and classrooms. And that involves objective number 1, which is culturally relevant teacher practices, and objective number 5, which says we will create equitable academic environments. So I just want to thank this team, because both of these plans, the proposal for the academic reading materials, what is commonly known when you're walking down the hall in the school as the reading room, the leveled reading book room, whatever the name of it is, the proposal for that and the proposal for the e-library system, both of these are about ensuring a community of rich reading and literacy learning together. And in Ann Arbor Public Schools, we are learners and we are readers. And as we heard from Ms. Bacalor earlier, we may be looking at a long winter. And so because of this proposal that we're bringing this evening, our children from every background will have at their fingertips all of the literacy and reading they could ever want. And I'm so proud of this work, and I want to thank you. And both Jennifer and Ann have been working to see about the curation of diverse authors and diverse stories and novels and books, so that every child, particularly our Black and brown children, can see themselves in the reading that they do. They can have both the mirror and the window to see and through their reading and literacy learning. We've always been, and Trustee Basquette says this often, we've always been a strong literacy district. But I feel like we're getting stronger, and in particular, the ability of students who are challenged by reading, whether that challenge is any number of things, dyslexia or other challenges, that these components have read aloud options, they have the highlighting, the sticky note, all of the tools that we would want. And of course, it's that universal design, that those tools make it easier and more accessible for everyone, but they make all the difference for students who may be struggling to learn to read. So I know there will be a lot of questions from the trustees on this topic, but I just have to share from the superintendent chair, it is a great day to bring this proposal forward. It moves us forward. And trustees, in my one-on-one briefings with you last week, I had misheard the numbers. And so I was so afraid that we wouldn't be able to keep it for more than 1 year. And I was delighted, Ms. Linden, when late Friday night, she sent more in-depth numbers. It still costs money, but it's better than what we thought, so good. And we will, I will make it my commitment to find some other money to save in order to be able to have this moving forward. Because my thinking is, if the board is supportive, once we have it, I don't know how we'll go back from having the richness that this offers, particularly for children who may not have print materials in the home. I'm sorry, I will wrap this up. I'm just so excited about this. I was at Mitchell Elementary on March 13th, and the children were lined up in the hallway to make their way through the library. Our media specialist checked out more than 25,000 books on that one half day. And that was every child in our system trying desperately to get some books to read. We didn't know if it was going to be 2 weeks, and little did we know it would be 5.5 months. But I am so proud that if we're able to move forward with this, every child will literally have the library with them. And so it is a great day to bring this forward. And I know there's factual information that you need to share, Ms. Linden, and our great literacy and media and library folks are here. But I just have to say, trustees, this is a big deal. And so let's sort out all the details before I get too excited. Ms. Linden.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swift. You just shared exactly why Ann Reeder and Jennifer Colby and I are beaming from ear to ear to be able to bring this proposal. We're excited to share some details with you, but you nailed it, Dr. Swift. This is really about removing barriers, which is a big part of our equity plan. It's a commitment we have, and we know that many students do not have access to books in the home, and now they will have it in the palm of their hand. And so let's, without further ado, jump into a presentation so you can see a few more interesting things about it. So we are recommending tonight the board to purchase Overdrive Sora for the district's district-wide e-library collection. It will cost the districts approximately $342,000, which seems like an awful lot. However, keep in mind that every year we spend between $65,000 and $85,000 to maintain our paper copy book libraries, the physical spaces in our schools. And so this year, some of those monies will be dedicated to help support the purchase of this curriculum and this collection. These materials are also materials that can be used by classroom teachers in their instruction, with class sets and small group sets as well. So it gives us just a whole lot of flexibility. This is the group of esteemed folks who have worked on this recommendation and proposal for you this evening. Jennifer Colby, our department chair for our librarians, and all of our librarians, PK through 12, connected, reviewed, and worked on this in conjunction with members of our English Language Arts department, including Sarah Andrew Vaughn and Erica Hatt, our district coordinators and department chairs. So I really want to thank all of these team members. They went through many, many systems and tools to arrive at this recommendation of Overdrive Sora. So let's jump in. Again, there were some pretty important criteria that this group identified, and you'll recognize a lot of language from our equity plan here. Equitable access district-wide, and I think an important caveat here is to also identify that books are a significant place where PTOs tend to spend fundraised monies on, so both for the book room and for the library. And there are some discrepancies in the earning power of PTOs across our district and how they fundraise. So this is important to note that children have access to the books across the district. It is not specific to a building. So it's really amazing and an equalizer across the district. As Dr. Swift mentioned, diverse authors and intentional curation of culturally representative text. Obviously, the goal is to personalize the independent choice reading so that students have access to the books they're interested in. We know that promotes reading and reading skill development and increased vocabulary. So another piece of the curation that is so important, which is why I'm so glad to be joined by Jennifer Colby and Ann Reeder, is really monitoring the choice text that students begin to check out. So in a print library, there are only so many copies. And when those copies are checked out, there's a wait list. We've all probably experienced this, waiting for your book to be available. In a digital platform, our media librarians can monitor that and in 24 hours provide additional copies electronically so that no student is waiting for more than a day. That's really incredible. We would not be able to do that without a digital platform. I already mentioned that the text can be used in instructional small group or whole class. We also looked at ease of use and interoperability with Schoology. All of those things are important to us, and this is where Overdrive Sora really rose to the top. So as you know, it's a digital library. The access we've already talked about. Students and families can search for things, and what we haven't talked about yet is the many thousands of audio files. So students can listen to audiobooks in ways they didn't have access to in our traditional libraries. And here I think is the very best thing, is that when the book is due, it is automatically returned. So there are no lost books. And you may be aware, you may not be aware that sometimes when a student loses a book, it is a deterrent to them checking out another one. And they never have to have that again, that fear of losing a book and not being responsible or not being able to get another one. So we're really proud of that. I won't read this slide to you, but there are some important pieces here in bold. Millions of titles in 45 languages. So not only translation tools, but books actually written in the target language would be available. So it's another way that we strengthen and recognize the cultures of our students who are entering into our district. I can't imagine a better way to make students feel at home than being able to check out a book in their native language. Annotation tools like sticky notes, highlighters, dictionaries, bookmarks, journals, those pieces are all there for students to utilize. And it's accessible because they each have a login. So each time they pick up the book again, electronically, those notes remain. They can return to them. So that's important, particularly from an instructional standpoint. Universal supports, and one piece that's really important in Sora is that they have font that is weighted. We'll show you a slide in a minute, where the bottom of the text is weighted font, which helps directionally for the letters that may, for a dyslexic reader, be moving about as they're reading in their perception, and also to increase the contrast, which makes that easier for students to read. Obviously, we still want to connect students to the digital collections at the Ann Arbor District Library to broaden what students have access to. We can do that. And obviously interests, we talk a lot about that because that's how we hook kids into reading. And then we talked about teachers being able to assign titles also to students to read. So here's a screenshot of what students may see. On the left is what an audiobook interface looks like when students choose a Sora audiobook. Very easy. You might recognize these titles. So very, very popular titles. Also many, many others that students may not have heard of yet, but will be offered to them because of their interests. The center photograph that you see there shows that weighted text, which supports dyslexic learners. So if you look really closely, you'll notice that the bottom of all the letters is a little bit darker, a little bit more weighted font. And the contrast is much, much better. There on the right, you're going to see how the dictionary tool works. So I mentioned that students can access that dictionary and log in and see recently looked up words. If they had, a beat on a word that they really liked and they want to use it again, they can see which words they've looked up. They can store them. Along the bottom, you can see the books that the student is reading. And you can see, if you look very closely at the bottom, there's some highlighting and text that the student didn't want to forget or wanted to be able to come back to. So that's something you can't do in a print book very easily without, marking it up. So proud of those tools as well. And so we may pause here for questions about Sora before we move into the leveled library presentation, if that's okay.
Right. See if I can get my. Okay, Trustee Lightfoot.
Thank you. Did I understand you to mean that it tracked what sort of, or not tracked, but it suggested other readings that you may be interested in, sort of like YouTube does or Netflix? Or really? That's awesome. Okay. I'm appreciating all these little amenities. I was really sold on just having the library accessible to all of our students when we first were looking at this. I was concerned about the price, but when we talked about all the things that it brought to benefit, as well as costs that we generally are paying, these little amenities are just adding up. They're really amazing. So thank you. I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
Trustee Lazarus.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I just would like to clarify that the cost, the 300,000, is to get into the system, to purchase the system for the 1 year. So that's not a reoccurring cost once we have to do that. The 83, you said 65 to 83,000 that we spend normally to update our current libraries. You know, someone who loves to hold a book in your hand, even though this is great, this is definitely an equalizer across our district, and I see the definite value in that. But will our actual physical libraries start dwindling away because we're reallocating monies from one to the, unless the CARES money keeps coming in every year? I mean, I guess that's my fear, is that some kids do, like, I know the world is changing and we're all going digital, but some kids still like to hold a book in their hand. And have we even, and that could be just something we put on a pin in it and just talk about it later, but I just want to bring that up as a potential concern, that we want to keep our libraries updated, but yet I understand.
Trustee Lazarus, I should have addressed that on the introduction, and I apologize. I want to be clear, there's no rolling back in our minds of our commitment to our print libraries. Going to the library is such an important part of a child's educational experience. My hope is that we can find ways to do both and Ms. Reeder, Ms. Colby, Ms. Linden, if you want to, because you guys live it every day, but I just want to say from the superintendency, yes, I'm glad we can pay this big amount with the CARES dollars if they're available, but it isn't our intention to have this use the library money moving forward at all.
I will reinforce what you shared, Dr. Swift. Our goal is to look for savings. We're asking in the memo you've seen for a $50,000 budget to maintain the e-collection, the SORA Overdrive collection year to year. Our plan is to only utilize those maintenance dollars, those curation dollars for our print libraries for this year only, because we find ourselves in this COVID situation, but not that we would utilize those year to year. So the ask is that we set aside monies to curate both collections and maintain both. And if you know me and Dr. Swift and the team, you'll know that we're looking for cost savings to offset year to year what those costs are. And so in the next presentation, you'll see we've already identified a way to offset. And so we'll keep looking for that here as well, to just eliminate things that we don't use as much anymore, so we can dedicate funds where they're needed most.
Yeah, I just noticed that, I know you haven't gone over the other My On Reader portion of it, but really, if we were to just stay with those two programs that does equalize access to all titles across the board, and doesn't matter per school, that it would equalize the savings that we would normally spend in the physical books purchase on an average, and what we would need to spend on an annual basis going forward if they keep their prices at this level, which is another question. But it would keep our general fund at least protected for a while, maybe a couple of years or so. So, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. You know, okay, Trustee Gaynor.
I very much appreciate the purpose of this and the diversity and everything, and I don't mean this negatively as it's going to come out, but just realistically, what's missing from this collection? What will students expect to or hope to find in this library that won't be there for any number of reasons?
Go ahead, you guys.
Don, I think I can answer that question. This is Jennifer Colby. Trustee Gaynor, I think the great thing about SORA is the librarians themselves do all the collection development. We choose the titles, we choose how many copies, and all of this is extremely responsive. Like Ms. Linden had mentioned, that we could have a request or see a hold on the copy of a specific title and have it ready for that student within 24 hours. And so I think our only limitation is what's available from the publisher. And I'm looking right now, and they have millions of titles from over 30,000 publishers. And so we have a huge marketplace of titles to choose from. So I think it will be our job as librarians to make sure that we have those systems in place for requests from students and teachers, so that we can be very responsive and have exactly what they expect and exactly what they want.
The most popular titles and classics and such.
Exactly. That's another reason why we chose this platform.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, too, at elementary, when we're, especially at a place like E2 STEAM where we have such a wide range of age groups, you know, I try to focus on print books, but so that leaves less money for things like audio materials. So in my mind, it's also really nice. Plus, audio has changed so much over the last 20 years. I don't really want to date myself, but it's changed so much over the last time that I've been working. It's, you know, if you buy a title, then a few years later, that technology has changed and people can actually use the title that you spend so much money on. So in my mind, this is a great way to access audio that I haven't been able to provide for students in the past.
Thank you.
Trustee Lazarus.
Thank you. I just have one quick question as you were talking. I've actually used Overdrive, and when you have a popular title, you're like in line, you know, through the AADL system. How would you be able to, if let's say J.K. Rowling comes out with her next book and every kid in, you know, from 6th grade on up wants to read this thing, how could we actually provide that would we be able to provide that to all the students?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Trustee Lazarus. That's the great thing about this responsive nature of this collection, and that we decide how many copies of titles we purchase. So the way we'll do this is we won't spend the entire amount of money up front. We'll spend a large chunk of the funds up front based on recommendations, based on what we know will be popular. And then we'll have funds throughout the year so that we can be responsive when we do find out that a title is really popular. We can see how many holds are placed on it, and then we can make choices based on different lending models also within the platform. We can choose to have a title that maybe is available for a certain amount of checkouts or a certain period of time. We could choose to purchase the title indefinitely. So we have multiple options, and that will work with the platform and work within the marketplace for Overdrive to make sure that we're responsive and to the needs and wants of our students and to the budget that we have.
Thank you. I hope for the one day that we have to have you guys come back to the board and ask for more money, because we've got too many students wanting to check out books.
I hope to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Kelly. Trustee Kelly.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I have to unmute my phone tonight because of the audio issues, so it took me a second. Thank you for this, and I really appreciate, you know, in our briefing, I had asked a bunch of questions related to this, and I saw so many of those answers in the presentation, so you saved me some effort to not repeat myself tonight, so I appreciate that. I do have 2 remaining questions about this piece, and I suspect one of them may be addressed in the next piece. And the first question is about decodable readers. So, you know, in an average classroom, a lot of the leveled readers, the early readers, are, you know, based on this balanced literacy, this whole word type of reading, which is sort of new reading, right? Most of us were raised on sounding things out. And so if kids are reading at home now, and they're reading with parents and using these readers, decodable readers, phonics readers, I can see being very important. But decodable readers are also vitally important for students who, like dyslexic students or students with features of dyslexia, that that really need that to be available so that they can access the book on their own. Is when the librarians are curating these collections, is there somebody with a specific eye on what actually is decodable that's helping curate that collection of the earlier readers?
You know what, it's a great question, and this is one reason we have these two really highly skilled and experienced folks here with us, and I think Maayan gives us even more latitude there. But maybe Andy, you want to take that? I will tell you that our librarians across the district are very much in tune to the needs of students. They serve students from all across the district, and so I think they do have a keen eye toward this. It is important for me to share also that a big part of our shifting this fall in our online instruction work is to make our instruction more culturally responsive, in addition to the text and the resources that we use. And this was shared a little bit by some of those public speakers writing and comments. So yes, our librarians are highly in tune. Jennifer Colby is our department chair for the district, and she's been in from the start with our culturally responsive planning. She also was deeply responsible for all the success at our summer programming, where we implemented our culturally responsive teaching practices, and she leads the department. And of course, Ann Reeder is one of those leaders right along with her, who is leading along with her colleagues. So I guess I'll stop talking and let these two fine folks share their focus.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's a matter of sort of understanding the purpose of each of the platforms. The Maayan platform is intended for the guided reading that would occur in a regular classroom setting if we were face-to-face. And so it has some supports built in automatically for our dyslexic readers. It has a read aloud feature that you can turn on for every book, and it's optional, so it's not something that has to be used. And that is something, if I'm remembering back to my research, that the teacher can turn on for a student. So when we are thinking about challenging students who might want to just listen to the book when, you know, they really need to practice the reading of the book and they have the ability to do that, the teacher can choose when to turn that on and off. But if a teacher knows that a student might need some extra support, they can turn that on, and then the words are highlighted as they're being read, and the student can follow along with the story and read the words together. In terms of when we are curating for the pleasure reading collection, we go with a different focus. And this has long been sort of like a sort of a push and pull with libraries, especially in elementary libraries. We want to make sure that students have things that are appealing to them, but not necessarily telling them that they have to be reading, choosing a pleasure reading book at a specific level, because that, in my experience, has led to just lack of joy of reading, right? And the goal with that kind of a platform is to get students in a situation where they just are excited about a book. Whether or not they can access the whole book in a pleasure reading setting is not always the goal. The goal is for them to have that excitement, and then to see, usually we rely on some other person, an adult in the school, or an adult at home, or an older sibling who could help read that book to the child if it is truly inaccessible. Or we come back and have a conversation about, well, let's think about the choices that we're making, and if, how did that book feel to you? Was it really difficult? What did you like about the book, and how can we steer you towards a book that might be something that would be easier for you to read or access? So these are all conversations that librarians typically have on a daily basis with students.
I just have one more addition, and you'll see it in the other slides when we talk about Maayan, but the district has purchased a tool called Snap and Read, that we invest in every year. It's a software application. And so for many of the texts that students are accessing, if the difficulty level is too much, in addition to dictionary tools and highlighting, there's also the Snap and Read app that will take a sentence and take those vocabulary words and replace them with words that are at a level that the student can understand. It's really a magical tool, and I have a couple screenshots that I'll show you also.
I look forward to it, and I appreciate the elaboration on the culturally representative pieces and the audio options and everything that I've heard about accessibility. But I'm asking a really specific question about text being decodable, and so what that means is that there's English is crazy, but there's rules about the way you use English and the way you build a word and the way you make sense of a word when you're seeing it and breaking it apart. And many of our students do fine seeing a whole word, even if the A doesn't say A when it's supposed to, even if the vowels aren't playing nice, right? That most readers are able to access that whole word, and they do it in those Fountas and Pinnell leveled readers, and they're fine. There's another chunk, a significant chunk of students that need to have the phonics-based stuff that you can sound out, and every word in the book, every letter in the book plays by the rules. And the phrase that is decodable because they can literally decode it based on a set of rules. And in my experience, and it was a few years ago now, we're moving past that, but when I walked into the Ann Arbor Public Library system with a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old and asked for their decodable early reader collection, one didn't exist. It just wasn't there. Our public library system didn't have them. Our public schools didn't have them. We were only using Fountas and Pinnell, and it was wholly inappropriate for dyslexic learners. So because we were able to, as a family, we were able to curate a collection of Bob books and some of those early decodable readers. But the point of this digital library is so that families aren't having to have privilege and resources to be able to curate their own library. And so my question is really specific about who on this team is helping to curate decodable readers, not access to non-decodable stuff, but decodable ones. And there's more. I mean, there's fun ones too. So Bob books are pretty elementary, but there's high-low readers that have high interest, high excitement, but they're at a decodable level for maybe the middle schooler who really doesn't want, those little paper cheapies.
That's right. No, I appreciate that question. And there are multiple ways that the librarians will search and curate to meet the needs. So Trustee Kelly, that's an important piece that I know Anne and Jennifer are taking note of. It's obviously something they are aware of. But I think also the MyOn collection, while we're presenting it as a leveled library tool that teachers will use for instruction, it's also usable for pleasure reading. Students can access by interest leveled readers that are designed to be decodable. So that tool that we'll talk about next does that. It is a collection that is decodable. So we've already kind of met that need, but we will continue to do so with this digital library from Sora as well. So I just so appreciate that question and your knowledge about that, Trustee Kelly.
And I just really appreciate your attention to it over the years. You've been so responsive. When we've done some literature purchases in the past and back in the good old days when, we were humans in the same room, you were able to bring us like some books so that we could see them and get our hands on them. Is there a way for us to be able to see what these libraries look like in real life? I mean, virtual life.
Yeah, Jennifer Colby and her team had trial access for a while to that tool so they could get in and play. And I'm wondering if that's still live, if that trial.
Could we send that to the trustees, Jennifer, do you think?
Yeah, of course. I have a Google Doc already for the Sora access, and I can make one for MyOn, or I might ask Anne to do that. I'm camping right now.
That would be great. Thank you, Jennifer.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Giving up your vacation evening.
Couldn't keep her away. She's so excited.
My last question, and I think this is a far more fun one. When the classrooms do the Scholastic book purchases, I know that there's always an opportunity for parents to contribute to the classroom library by making certain purchases in those orders. Is there a way for parents to contribute to this library?
I think
Maybe
so.
even, is there a way for them to receive donations to continue
Yeah,
the program for a little while longer?
I'm so glad you bring that up. I think there's definitely a way to do that. I mean, with Sora, it's a collection that we have the funds and then we spend the funds. So if we get more funds from parents or PTSOs, we can definitely use that money to purchase more copies of titles.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And I know this community loves their books. So, you know, if you build that link, I'm sure they will come. So thank you so much for your work on this. I look forward to seeing what we're putting in the hands of kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Ms. Linden, I know you have another portion, and Trustee Nelson, I see you have a question. Can it wait till after the next section, or is it pressing right now?
Yes, it can easily wait.
Great, thanks.
All right. So Mayan, this is the elementary digital leveled library. It is a program by Renaissance. I didn't name it Mayan. It's an interesting title, but there it is. And similarly to the collection that we just talked about, this tool is really designed to support reading instruction and reading interest of our youngest readers, our PK through 5. And Ms. Ann Reeder can jump in at any time to add to this piece. But it is leveled. It is designed for teachers to both assign text to student, to use in small group, to use whole class if need be, but also for students to pursue interests and to work at their own pace and read books on their own and independently. It is selected because of the diverse and culturally representative text as a part of this tool. There are thousands of both nonfiction and fiction. And what is rare these days is finding a platform that has more nonfiction than fiction, and this is one of the tools that does that. So we're pretty proud of that. So not only will students be improving their vocabulary, their fluency, their reading skills in general, they'll also be supporting their learning along the lines of social studies and science and aligned to other learning in the classroom. So it's got a lot of dual operability. Students in this tool, and this goes to Trustee Kelly's question also, are able to access books on the same topic, but at multiple levels. And this is really important when you think about a universal design for learning. So nothing makes me happier than when I walk into a general education 3rd grade ELA classroom or science classroom and I see students learning a topic, and then I walk down the hall to a self-contained classroom where students are learning in a special education focused classroom and I see the same content being discussed. That's making general ed accessible to all students, and that's the goal of a universal design. So this just gets us even further down the path of realizing that. And of course, operability with Schoology. So these are just a few of the wonderful attributes of this tool. There were probably 25, Anne, in your original proposal, but I couldn't fit them all on the slide. So of course we narrowed it down to the top, but we'd be happy to share a lot more with the community and with you. This is pre-K through elementary. So our 3- and 4-year-olds will have access to this tool in addition to our 5th graders. Small group, like we talked about, a really important piece is anytime access. So if a student wants to check out a book on a Saturday or a Sunday, they don't have to wait for the school to be open for them to do that, or for the Ann Arbor District Library to open. They can access it anytime. Certainly our goal was to use this tool for robust reading instruction, and this will help us accomplish that. And of course, there's an unlimited number of students at a time who can use the tool. And what we all love to see is, what does the interface look like? So this is a pre-K through grade 1 example of what a student might see when they open the book. So here you can see that the print is on the page. It's colorful. It looks like a traditional paper book, but it's in this electronic format. And you can see tools along the left-hand side that the student can use in addition to hearing the book. So you'll see that speaker button on the bottom left. And then you see on the second piece, a little higher, different tools that elementary students might be using to help access their learning and things that are of interest. So that particular one has basketball as a theme. So here's an interesting piece about it. With Mayan, students can take an interest survey at the beginning, and they will begin with a customized match for their topic and their reading levels. So what Ann Reeder was explaining about the tension between students choosing something of interest and also being forced to pick something at their level, oftentimes those things don't match up and we end up doing a disservice, right, to students. This tool, we hope, will accomplish both things. We'll be able to attach interest to something that's exciting to read, but also have it be readable. We talked about the audio support. These books are also available in English and Spanish. And these are professional audio recordings. These aren't something someone recorded in a garage. These are professional and they're lovely. No offense to the garage recorders out there. There are close reading tools and scaffolds to support students. So another part of that universal design and support for students who just need that scaffolding. English language learners particularly can benefit from this and will pick up and learn very quickly. And then a really exciting piece for me, having been such a part of the elementary programs for so many years in this district, is getting to that stage of goal setting with students that we know has a high yield on academic success. So this tool allows us, even when we're virtual, to set goals together with students for their reading and for teachers to continue to monitor and support that. It's really, really important to us in this next phase while we're virtual that teachers are with the students and are aware of what's happening with their reading goals. And connected to that is this dashboard that shows student progress and goals as they're reading their books. So here's an example of what we mean by close reading. It's scaffolding. It allows students to graphically organize their learning. Teachers can help support this as well, highlight and work with students individually and in small group. This is just one example. It's a little bit higher difficulty in this particular example, but you can see that the student has gone in and highlighted important information. All along the bottom, they can use different colors for students with dyslexia and other needs. Sometimes having a blue tint is helpful. Sometimes a red tint or a yellow tint is helpful. So we have all of those capabilities here. It's a really important part of it. And then in addition, here is an example, Trustee Kelly, of the Snap and Read that I was sharing with you. So in this tool, a student can highlight or use the Snap and Read tool to peruse a particular paragraph. And this gives you an example of what might be scaffolded. So before, the sentence said he pledged to promptly release his emails about the issue. And after, it says he promised to quickly release. So it allows students to see the difficult text and also to get that version that is a little more understandable. And so we'll pause there for questions and allow my colleagues here who are way more knowledgeable about this tool to share their responses.
We'll start with my very patient trustee, Trustee Nelson.
And mine is just a comment. I think these tools are absolutely wonderful. I'm going to tell a quick story, which is part of the reason I feel that way. That I grew up on a farm in western Minnesota, and we weren't poor, but there wasn't a lot of money. And a country school closed near us, and my father bought the library, which I think was like a couple dollars or something. And it was 100 books approximately. And he put them on his shelves, and I thought, this is so fabulous. This is so fabulous. And I read those books and felt like, what a wonderful thing. And I can just imagine our students, at least some of them, thinking, I can hardly believe this. This is so wonderful. And so I'm just excited for all of our students, but especially for the ones who don't have as many books in the house, that some of them are going to have their eyes open to things that never would have happened. So this will be one of the most fun votes I will make this year, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nelson. Trustee Kelly.
Sure, thank you. How will students be trained in using these tools, like in the before and after text and the highlighting? How will they learn about the functionality?
That's a great question. We're already working on that in conjunction with our ELA department and our BLEs, especially with Mayan.
So can I just say, Jennifer,
Sure.
building literacy experts.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I had to learn that this summer as well.
Yeah.
Yes, so with our building literacy experts and our teachers, the ELA departments and the librarians are working to make sure all teachers understand how to use the Mayan. And we're saying Mayan first because once that is that contract is signed, that platform is turned on right away. Sora will take about 6 weeks or less once the contract is signed. So we're focusing on Mayan right now because that collection will be up and running. And then as we get closer to Sora up and running, we'll start training our teachers in that platform as well so they can help students.
Yeah, and at the
Great.
elementary
And then
level,
No, go ahead.
at the elementary level, we have plans to teach the students directly once we have Sora within our classroom settings as well.
very cool. Thank you. I saw in the comments that there was a Google Doc emailed, and sometimes those take a minute. I just want you to know that it's not in yet. So if you sent it long enough ago that you think it might be, then there might be a glitch.
I might try again tomorrow. Again, I'm way up north with no service, and hopefully it will happen. But I'll try again. If email me, please. It's just Colby, COLBY, at AAPS. If you don't get it by tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Trustee Lazarus.
Thank you, President Johnson. I just want to make a comment. After seeing these two presentations, and I understand how this is now going to equalize our access to and provide the equity that we have promised in our equity plan and make it go forward, that it sounds like a lot of money. It really does. And it is a lot of money. You know, it's almost $500,000. But it works out to just under $25 per student. You can't even hardly buy a book for that. So to have every student have access to the hundreds and thousands of titles that they will have access to this is a drop in the bucket. And I hope that somehow, some way in our advocacy to our legislators, that we can use this as a story of how monies that we need to fund our schools properly, that this will be monies that will have to come out of our general fund next year, but we need to be, as a district, dedicated and committed to continue these two programs at least. I'm sure there might come up some new one down the road that's a better mousetrap, but this is quite an amazing collection of books that I'm very excited to make sure that every kid gets access to this. Thank you. Thank you for the work.
I would like to point out, and Dawn did have this in her presentation, but another reason why we chose Sora, and Overdrive is the company, and you said, Trustee Lazarus, I believe, that you'd used Libby through AADL, which is Overdrive's public library ebook platform.
Overdrive, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now if we have Sora, the school library version of Libby, then all of our AAPS students, we've been in contact with AADL, we can turn that switch so they'll not only have access to our collection, but also the collection that the AADL shares with the consortium of public libraries.
Right. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
For all the work.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you, Trustee Lazarus. I had a quick question. I did see that that some of this would be offset by the non-renewal of the RazKids level book software, and we always have people who, no matter how great the new thing is, they just love the old thing. And I remember RazKids with my young kids. Does this replace the need for RazKids? Is that basically why we're doing this?
It absolutely replaces the need for Raz kids. It is really like purchasing a bicycle when you can have a Maserati. So I don't think people will be upset, truly. But I do appreciate it. There's always some.
Yeah.
Kids don't drive Maseratis now.
And would you add to that from an elementary perspective? Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Yes, I would. And for a couple of reasons. I mean, my son learned how to read in part because of Raz Kids, so I am also nostalgic about that. But from the teacher perspective, when you have a student who's in 5th grade, maybe reading at a 2nd grade level, and you're trying to support him or her with Raz Kids, if the look and feel of it is much younger, and so you're already trying to engage the student with text, but then you're putting them on a platform that doesn't match their maturity level. So the Mayan platform is one that has a universal appeal that doesn't feel too old or too young, and would take that piece of it out, so you can focus on the content and the learning.
Absolutely.
Also, President Johnson, Heather Kellstrom told me this spring when we were talking about the cost of Raz Kids versus the cost of Mayan, she was able to look up and saw that only, excuse me, there's a car driving by, only about 30 teachers district-wide were using Raz Kids as of last year.
Got it.
So not too many will be missing it.
That's good to know. Well, thank you. Thanks everyone so much for that.
President Johnson,
Yep.
could we ask one quick thing? Because I'm so happy to have these ladies with us, and Dawn also, but we want this for every child in the universe. But I also need to know these things. Do other districts have a similar setup as to these two platforms?
Very few. In fact, if you Google Overdrive and Sora, you'll see some districts across the nation, but it isn't common. So I will let Jennifer and Ann respond to that. But I just want you to know I looked up too, because I wanted to see who had a subscription to something this robust, and we will be in a small population.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
I believe we'll be the only district in Washtenaw County that has access to Sora Overdrive.
Jeff, go ahead.
No,
I'm sorry.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Jeff asked in his briefing, he and I are readers, as many of you are, that like to have a stack of books, and this only allows one. Is there a subscription that allows more than one?
Do you mean one copy per student? Is that what you mean?
At a time. So they can only.
We have that kind of control. We can determine how many copies a student will have access to at a time, and we'll make those choices based on grade level, just like we do with our print books.
So will some get more than one?
It will all depend on how many copies we have in our collection, but that amount that we're asking for is that at least there'll be one copy available for every student for Sora. And now we'll also have Mayan. So again, at the elementary level, they'll have access to the Mayan titles, which are simultaneous use. So I could be accessing multiple titles in Mayan at one time. Okay. And then Sora, I could also access titles there. So we'll closely monitor to make sure that all our students have access to titles. And also think about this. This is something one of our elementary librarians had pointed out. If I'm an elementary student checking out a book at, say, BOE, I check out one book if I'm a first grader. And then I don't come back until the next week to check out another book. With Sora, I can check out my one book tonight, read it, turn it back in, check out another book tomorrow.
That's right. That's good. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, President Johnson. I have that competitive side, so I just want to know if they can keep.
I think you can say yes to that one.
Yeah, I felt like I'm just too random global to just be doing one book at a time. I've got to have them spread out and pick up the one at the moment.
Yeah, Yeah, I felt like the basketball analogy we saw earlier was fitting because you threw up the alley and let them do the oop and do the slam dunk. So that felt like a little bit of a setup, but I definitely definitely look forward to seeing those again for second briefing at our next meeting. Thank you very much, everyone, for answering all those questions.